I'm gonna tell you this straight. If I hadn't learned how to smile while my stomach was screaming danger, I wouldn't be alive right now. People think you hit your 60s and life slows down, that you get soft, predictable, that you stop noticing the tiny cracks in things. That's a lie. Age doesn't dull you, it sharpens you. You just learn to stay quiet about what you see. The morning my husband surprised me with that Paris trip, I already felt something was off. Not loud. Not obvious. Just wrong in the way a room feels after an argument nobody admits happened. Caleb stood in the kitchen holding 2 coffee mugs, smiling like a man auditioning for a commercial. Same grin he used when neighbors were over. Same gentle voice, same fake warmth that had fooled me for 34 years. "Pack light," he said. "Just you and me. Fresh air, new memories." New memories. Lord, if he only knew what kind he was about to give me. I played along. Of course I did. I'd been playing along my whole marriage. I nodded, kissed his cheek, thanked him like a grateful little wife. But inside, something kept tapping me on the ribs, saying, "Pay attention, Loretta." The night before the trip, I couldn't sleep. Caleb slept just fine, breathing slow and steady beside me, like a man with a clean conscience. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few months, the forgetting he kept pointing out, the pills he insisted I take every morning, the way he spoke about me lately, instead of to me. She gets confused. She doesn't remember conversations. She's been emotional. Funny thing was, I remembered everything. I remembered the look on his face when I asked what those pills actually were. I remembered how fast he changed the subject. I remembered the quiet phone calls he took in his office and locked the door for. But when you've been married that long, you learn how to doubt yourself before you doubt your husband. That's how they train us, even if nobody ever says it out loud. Morning came too fast. The taxi pulled up right on time, engine humming, like it was eager to take me far away from my own damn life. Caleb carried my suitcase out, kissed me on the forehead again, told me he'd meet me at the airport later after one last meeting. That should have been my second morning. The first was standing right there by the hydrangeas. Eli, our gardener, quiet man, kept his head down, never crossed a boundary in 10 years. He knew the land better than anyone, but he never pretended to know our business. That's why when he broke into a jog toward me, my heart skipped hard enough to hurt. I thought maybe he'd hurt himself, or maybe the dog got loose again. Instead, he grabbed my wrist, hard. I gasped. Caleb spun around, already annoyed, already defensive. "Eli, what the hell?" "Ma'am," Eli said, eyes locked on mine, voice shaking. "Please, don't go." Huh. I laughed. A reflex. A woman's laugh when she's uncomfortable but trained not to show it. "It's okay," I said. "I'm just going on a trip." Eli's grip tightened. His eyes were glassy, desperate. "No," he whispered. "You're not." The world went quiet. Even the taxi engine sounded far away. Caleb stepped forward. "Let go of my wife." That word, wife, landed wrong, like he was claiming property. Eli leaned closer to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "If you leave today," he said, "you won't come back." My blood turned to ice. I should have asked questions. I should have screamed. I should have dragged the truth out of him right there in the driveway. Instead, I smiled. Because that's what women like me do when we're scared. I gently pulled my wrist free and patted Eli's arm. "You're tired," I said softly. "Get some rest." His face crumpled like he knew he'd failed. I got into the taxi. Caleb waved, smiling big, already turning back toward the house before the car even moved. But halfway down the block, I told the driver to circle around. I don't know what made me do it. Pride? Instinct? Or maybe it was the way Eli had looked at me, like he was watching a coffin lid close. I paid the driver extra, waited until the house was quiet, and slipped back onto my own property through the side gate. I hid in the guest house. And that's when I learned the most dangerous thing in the world isn't hatred. It's planning. Less than an hour later, a black van rolled into my driveway. No logos. Dark windows. Engine running. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. Because deep down, I already knew. And I knew one more thing too. If I survived whatever was coming next, I was done being quiet. I stayed frozen behind that guest house window so long my knees started shaking. But I didn't dare move. Fear has a sound when it settles into your bones. It's quiet, but it buzzes. That's what I felt, watching that black van idle in my driveway like it owned the place. The front doors of the van opened. 2 men stepped out first. Not in suits, not in uniforms either. Just plain clothes, stiff posture, no curiosity in their faces. Men who didn't knock. Men who expected doors to already be open. Then a woman followed. Mid-40s maybe. Hair pulled tight, clipboard tucked under her arm like it was part of her body. She didn't look around the yard, didn't admire the flowers I'd planted with my own hands. She walked straight toward my front door, like she'd been there before. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out right there behind the hydrangeas. I pressed my palm against the glass, forcing myself to breathe slow. This wasn't random. This was scheduled. I watched one of the men pull something from the van. A folder. Thick, stuffed. Paperwork. Names. Forms. Signatures. My name. I didn't need to see it to know. The woman knocked once, not polite, just enough to say we're here. When no one answered, she nodded to one of the men, who reached into his pocket and pulled out keys. Keys. My vision blurred. That son of a gun had given them access. I backed away from the window and crouched low, heart banging like it was trying to escape my ribs. My brain finally kicked into survival mode, connecting dots I'd been too polite to see before. The pills, the doctor appointments he handled, the conversations he cut short whenever I walked into a room, the way he kept telling people I was having episodes. This wasn't about Paris. Paris was just the excuse to get me out of the way. A few seconds later, the front door opened. I couldn't hear much, but I could see shadows moving through the house I'd lived in for decades, like it already belonged to someone else. The woman's voice drifted out faintly. "She's not here." One of the men cursed under his breath. I hugged my arms around myself, teeth chattering now, not from cold, but from rage finally waking up. They weren't worried. They weren't panicking. That told me everything. They expected me to be gone. Expected me to be confused, drugged, easy to move. My husband didn't plan to send me to Paris. He planned to lose me somewhere along the way, probably telling her I must have gotten turned around, that I'd wandered off, that I'd been forgetful lately. That word again. Forgetful. The van doors stayed open. I stayed hidden until the van finally backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. I didn't move for another 10 minutes after that. I needed silence, needed to know they were really gone. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak, but my mind had never been clearer. I didn't go back inside right away. Instead, I walked straight to the shed. Eli was there, sitting on an overturned bucket, hands clasped together like he'd been praying hard. When he saw me, his face drained of color. "You're still here," he whispered. "Yeah," I said, "because of you." He swallowed. "They came, didn't they?" I nodded. His shoulders slumped, like a man who'd been carrying a secret too heavy for too long. He looked older than he had that morning. "I heard him," Eli said quietly. "Your husband, on the phone, weeks ago." My stomach twisted. "He didn't know you were there." Eli shook his head. "Didn't matter. He wasn't being careful anymore." I stepped closer. "Tell me everything." Eli took a deep breath. "He said you were sick, said doctors agreed, said he had paperwork ready, said once you were placed somewhere permanent, everything would be easier." Easier. That word hit harder than any slap. "He talked about money," Eli continued. "About debts. About needing things to end clean." My hands clenched into fists, so tight my nails dug into my palms. I didn't cry. That surprised me. What I felt was something heavier. Something solid. Resolve. I looked back at the house. My house. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small inside it. I felt dangerous. Because now I knew the truth. And Caleb had no idea his quiet little wife had just stepped out of the role he wrote for her. He thought he was dealing with a woman who'd panic. What he didn't know was that I was already planning how to bury him without ever touching a shovel. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared. Fear had already burned itself out. But because my brain wouldn't shut up. Once you see the truth, really see it, sleep feels like a luxury you can't afford. I sat in that little guest house till dawn, wrapped in an old quilt that still smelled like sun and laundry soap, listening to every sound outside. Every car that passed made my shoulders tense. Every creak of wood felt louder than it should have been. Around 4 a.m., I finally stood up and looked at myself in the mirror hanging crooked on the wall. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Same face, same gray hair pulled back tight. But the softness? Gone. The hesitation? Gone. That woman who used to apologize for existing had packed her bags and left. Sometime between that gardener grabbing my wrist and that black van rolling up my driveway. I made coffee on the little hot plate Eli kept in the shed. Strong, black, no sugar. I needed my mind sharp, not comforted. By sunrise, I had a plan. First thing I did was go back into the house. I didn't sneak. I didn't tiptoe. I walked in through the back door like I belonged there, because I did. The living room looked the same. Couch fluffed, pillows straight, family photos smiling back at me like everything was normal. That almost made me laugh. I went straight to Caleb's study. He always kept it locked, said it was work stuff. For years, I respected that, trusted him, thought privacy meant love. That door didn't stand a chance anymore. I knew where he hid the spare key. I'd cleaned that desk 1,000 times over the years. People forget how invisible an older woman becomes. They stop guarding their secrets. Inside the study, the air felt different, colder, like lies had weight. I started with the filing cabinet, folders, dates, notes written in his neat, careful handwriting. I read slowly, forcing myself not to rush, not to miss anything. Doctor appointments scheduled without my knowledge. Emails to facilities I'd never heard of. Payment confirmations. And then I found the medication log. That's when my hands started shaking. Dates lined up perfectly with the days I'd felt foggy, dizzy, confused. The mornings I couldn't remember conversations. The times I'd blamed myself for aging badly. He'd written notes beside them. Increased dosage, monitor behavior, still compliant. Compliant. Like I was livestock. I sat down in his leather chair and let that word sink in. 34 years of marriage reduced to a checklist and a dosage chart. That's when the anger hit. Not loud, not wild, but steady and cold. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that plans. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every page, every email, every receipt. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I documented like my life depended on it. Because it did. Halfway through, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart jumped, but I didn't stop. Footsteps. A door opening. Then Caleb's voice. "Laureen?" He called out, fake concern dripping like syrup. "Honey, you back?" I stayed silent. I listened as he walked through the house, calling my name, playing the worried husband role to an empty room. When he reached the study door, I could hear his breath hitch. The lock clicked. I stayed seated. When the door opened and he saw me sitting there, holding his secrets in my hands, his face did something strange. Not shock, calculation. "There you are," he said carefully. "You scared me." I stood up slow. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. His eyes flicked to the open file drawer, then to my phone. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, voice tightening. "You shouldn't be drugging your wife," I answered, calm as Sunday morning. For a split second, the mask slipped. Just a crack. Enough. "You're confused," he said quickly, stepping closer. "You've been confused lately. You know that." "No," I said. "I've been poisoned." Silence filled the room like thick smoke. He tried another angle. "Laureen, you don't understand what you're reading." "Oh, I understand just fine," I replied. "Dates, doses, payments. You planned this." His jaw clenched. "You're sick." "I'm awake." That's when he reached for my arm. I didn't scream. I didn't pull away. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Touch me again, and this house becomes a crime scene." He froze. I leaned in close enough that he could see the truth in my eyes. Not fear, not confusion, certainty. "I know about the facility," I whispered. "I know about the paperwork. And I know about the van." His face went pale. "You weren't supposed to know that," he muttered. That's when I knew. I had him. Because men like Caleb don't fear anger. They fear exposure. He stepped back, hands in a rock. Past him, phone in my pocket, heavy with proof, knowing one thing for certain. He thought he was the hunter, but now he was the one being watched. Raised. "Let's talk," he said. "We can fix this." I smiled. "No," I said softly. "You already fixed it." I didn't leave the house after that confrontation. That surprised even me. Caleb expected me to bolt, to panic, to call someone crying, or pack a bag and disappear. Men like him always assume fear will do their dirty work for them. So I stayed. I went into the kitchen, poured myself another cup of coffee, and sat at the table like it was any other morning. My hands were steady now. That scared him more than yelling ever could. He hovered near the doorway, watching me like I might shatter at any second. "You should rest," he said carefully. "Doctor says stress makes things worse." I looked up at him. Funny. Doctor also says lying makes men sloppy. His jaw tightened. He didn't reply. Instead, he grabbed his keys and left the house, tires peeling out of the driveway like he was running from a fire. That's when the real work began. I waited 10 minutes. Not 5, not 2, 10. Enough time for him to feel confident I wasn't following. Then I moved. First stop was the bedroom. I packed a small bag. Nothing obvious. No suitcases. Just clothes I could move in. My passport, cash I'd hidden years ago and forgotten about, and the small recorder Eli had given me, just in case. Next, I went back to the study. This time, I didn't rush. I checked his computer. Password was still our anniversary. 34 years. And he still thought sentiment was a shield. Emails confirmed everything. Conversations with a private facility. A doctor who spoke in vague, slippery language. Payments labeled as consultations. One message made my stomach flip. Once she's admitted, timeline accelerates naturally. Naturally. I forwarded everything to a new email address I'd created that morning, under a name Caleb wouldn't recognize. Then I wiped the sent folder clean. After that, I called one person. Not the police. Not a lawyer. I called a woman I used to volunteer with years ago. Retired social worker. Sharp as a tack. Didn't scare easy. She answered on the second ring. "Laureen," she said, "you all right, honey?" "No," I replied, "but I'm about to be." I told her everything, slowly, clearly. Dates, names, facilities, the van. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "You're not crazy, and you're not safe." "I know." "Good," she replied, "because I'm calling in favors." By late afternoon, I had a safety net forming. Quiet, professional, invisible. People who knew how these schemes worked. People who believed me. Caleb came home that evening, acting like nothing had happened. Too calm, too gentle. He made dinner, asked if I wanted soup, put on soft music. That's when I knew he was switching tactics. He sat across from me at the table and sighed. "I've been under so much pressure," he said. "I just wanted to help you." I stirred my soup slowly. "By locking me away?" "By keeping you safe," he corrected. I met his eyes. "From who?" He didn't answer. Later that night, he brought me pills, different ones. "I talked to the doctor," he said. "These should help you sleep." I smiled sweetly and took them. Then I walked into the bathroom, flushed them down the toilet. and replace them with identical capsules I'd emptied earlier. That was the moment the game changed. Because from then on, every move he made, I knew about. Every call, every appointment, every lie. 2 days later, he told me we had another doctor visit scheduled. I pretended to be nervous. I pretended to forget the date. I pretended perfectly. The night before the appointment, I slept better than I had in months. Because I wasn't walking into a trap anymore. I was walking into a stage, and I was ready to perform. The morning of the appointment, I woke up before Caleb did. That alone felt like rebellion. I lay there, listening to him breathe, that calm, steady rhythm of a man who thought everything was under control. For years, I used to find comfort in that sound. That morning sounded like a countdown. I slipped out of bed quietly and got dressed slow on purpose. Not shaky, not confused, calm enough to pass, focused enough to remember every detail. I chose soft colors, nothing sharp. Hair brushed, no makeup except a touch of lipstick. Not enough to look defiant, just enough to look like I still cared. He liked that. Women who still cared. When I came into the kitchen, he looked relieved. "Morning," he said gently, too gently, like you'd speak to a child holding a glass plate. "Morning," I replied, letting my voice waver just a little. "We going somewhere today?" There it was, that tiny flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Yes," he said. "Dr. Harrison, just to check in." I nodded like it was news to me. "Okay, you'll stay with me, right?" "Of course," he said, already winning in his head. We drove in silence. He held my hand the whole way, not lovingly, possessively, like he was afraid I'd jump out at a red light and vanish. The building was clean, too clean, smelled like lemon and money. The kind of place where bad decisions wear expensive suits and call themselves professionals. Dr. Harrison's office looked exactly like you'd expect. Dark wood, fake warmth, diplomas arranged just right so you'd trust him without thinking too hard. Caleb did all the talking at first. "She's been declining faster," he said. "Confusion, mood swings, paranoia." I stared at the carpet like it was moving. Dr. Harrison nodded, scribbling notes that already existed before I walked in. "Mrs. Holloway," he said softly, "do you know why you're here today?" I looked at Caleb, then back at the doctor. "Am I in trouble?" I asked. Caleb squeezed my hand, hard. "No, sweetheart," he said. "We're helping you." The doctor started the questions. "What year is it? Who is the president?" Can I remember 3 simple words? I answered wrong, but not stupid wrong. Just enough. A missed year. A name almost right. Confusion that looked real but wasn't sloppy. Caleb watched like a proud director watching his play. Then came the part he didn't expect. Halfway through, I leaned forward suddenly, eyes wide. "Doctor," I said, my voice trembling, "can I ask you something?" He smiled politely. "Of course." "Why does my husband keep changing my pills?" The room went still. Caleb laughed too fast. "There she goes again." But I wasn't done. "They make me dizzy," I continued. "Sleepy. Sometimes I can't stand up. Is that normal?" Dr. Harrison hesitated. "Just a second." But I saw it. "That can happen," he said carefully. I reached into my purse with shaking hands and pulled out a small plastic bag. "These are the pills," I said. "I saved them. Caleb's face drained of color. Dr. Harrison examined them. Too closely, too carefully. "Mrs. Holloway," he said slowly, "where did you get these tested?" "I did," I replied, calm now, clear, at an independent lab. Caleb stood up. "This is ridiculous. She's lying." That's when I placed the recorder on the desk and pressed play. His voice filled the room, talking about timelines, facilities, how things would resolve themselves. The doctor leaned back, like the chair suddenly burned him. I stood up. "No more acting," I said. "I know about Millbrook Manor. I know about the money, and I know about the van." The door opened. Spencer stepped in. Behind him, a woman with a state badge and a uniformed officer. Caleb turned toward them, mouth opening and closing like a man underwater. The social worker spoke calmly. "Mrs. Holloway contacted us days ago." The officer looked at Caleb. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Caleb spun toward me. "Lorene, please, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand," I said quietly. "I finally understand everything." They took him out shouting. I didn't follow. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted, and felt something heavy lift off my chest. Outside, I saw it through the window. The black van parked across the street, waiting. And that's when it really hit me. If Spencer hadn't grabbed my wrist that morning, I wouldn't be walking out of this building. I'd be disappearing. They didn't let me see him when they took him away. And thank God for that. Because if I'd seen his face up close in that moment, the panic, the rage, the disbelief, I might have shaken, might have doubted myself, might have slipped back into being the woman who apologized for breathing too loudly. Instead, I watched through the glass as they walked him down the hallway. No handcuffs yet, just firm hands on his elbows, polite voices, procedure. That's how it always starts. Men like Caleb don't get dragged right away. They get escorted. They get chances. They get explanations. Women like me almost didn't get it tomorrow. Dr. Harrison wouldn't look at me. He kept rearranging papers on his desk, like if he lined them up just right, the past hour would disappear. The social worker, her name was Denise, sat beside me and spoke softly, like I'd actually earned kindness instead of surviving betrayal. "You did the right thing," she said. I nodded, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because the truth is, courage doesn't feel strong while it's happening. It feels like terror with better posture. Spencer stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He hadn't said much since we arrived, but I didn't need him to. His presence alone was proof I wasn't imagining things. That mattered more than anything. They took my statement that afternoon. Every word felt like ripping open old stitches. I told them about the pills, the paperwork, the phone calls overheard, the black van, the way my husband slowly changed from a man I loved into someone I didn't recognize, or maybe someone I'd never really known. Denise wrote everything down. The officer recorded it. Dr. Harrison asked for a lawyer. That alone told me everything. When we finally left the building, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I breathed in cold air like I'd been underwater for years. "I thought I was going to die," I said suddenly. Spencer stopped walking. "I know." he said quietly. That's why I grabbed your wrist. I looked at him then. Really looked. This wasn't a hero. This was a man who noticed things, who didn't look away, who chose to act when it would have been easier to mind his own business. Those people are rare. The house didn't feel like home anymore. That first night back, every creak sounded like footsteps. Every headlight passing outside made my stomach drop. I slept on the couch with a lamp on and my phone in my hand, like a lifeline. Caleb didn't come home. Instead, his lawyer called the next morning. He wanted to clear things up. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Clear things up? Like the trail was a misunderstanding. Like attempted imprisonment was a scheduling issue. The calls didn't stop. Friends we'd known for years started reaching out. Confused, concerned, curious. Caleb says you've been having an episode. He's worried about you. He says you turned on him. I didn't defend myself. I documented every voicemail, every message, every person repeating his words like gospel. That's the thing about men like him. They spread the story early, confident you'll never be believed. What they don't expect is receipts. The investigation moved faster than I thought. Turns out, Knowbrook Manor wasn't new to law enforcement. Neither was Dr. Harrison. They just never had someone walk in with proof, witnesses, recordings, and a calm, coherent voice. I wasn't hysterical. I wasn't confused. I was precise. That scared them more than tears ever could. When they arrested Caleb officially, this time with cuffs, I wasn't there. I was in the guest house with Spencer, drinking coffee that tasted like freedom. They found the insurance policy, he said. I nodded. I know. They're calling it attempted financial exploitation and conspiracy. I closed my eyes. For weeks, the adrenaline faded and something heavier settled in. Grief. Not for him. For me. For the woman who wasted decades believing love meant endurance. For every red flag I folded into a napkin and ignored. For every time I let myself be smaller to keep peace. That morning took time. Court came next. He didn't look at me during testimony. I looked straight at him. Not angry, not afraid, just finished. When the judge read the sentence, I felt nothing dramatic. No tears, no triumph, just relief. Because survival doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a door finally locking behind you. I sold the house. Every room echoed with memories I didn't want anymore. I packed only what belonged to me before him. The rest stayed behind like shed skin. My new place was small, sunlit, honest. No locked drawers, no hidden files, no lies disguised as care. Spencer helped me move. He never asked for anything. That told me more about his character than any grand gesture ever could. Months passed, then letters came. Women who read about the case. Daughters, granddaughters, neighbors. Stories that sounded too familiar. Pills, doctors, facilities, money disappearing. That's when I realized something. I didn't just escape. I interrupted a pattern. So I started helping. Quietly at first. Phone calls, advice, names of people who could be trusted. Then louder, a small foundation, legal support, advocacy, not revenge, protection. At night, I sit on my porch and watch the sky darken, listening to the wind move through trees I chose myself. I'm not the woman I was. I'm sharper now, quieter, harder to fool, and if someone ever tries to erase me again, they better be ready, because this time I won't survive quietly. The first time a stranger thanked me, I didn't know how to respond. She was a woman I'd never met, standing across from me in a courthouse hallway, hands shaking, eyes red, like she hadn't slept in days. "I read about what you did," she said. "Because of you, I checked my mom's meds." That sentence hit me harder than any headline ever could. Her mother had been taking the same kind of vitamins, different brand, same effects: fog, confusion, dependence. A son managing her finances to help. They caught it early. That woman hugged me like I pulled her family back from the edge of a cliff. I went home that night and cried until my chest hurt. Not from sadness, from the weight of realizing how close I'd come to disappearing without a sound. Once the case went public, everything cracked open. The news stations didn't just run my story, they ran patterns. Same facilities, same doctors, same paperwork, language copy-pasted like a template. Millbrook Manor shut its doors within a month. Federal agents boxed up files. Administrators resigned. Nurses came forward. Orderlies talked. And suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. There were 12 of us. Then 16. Then more. Older women mostly. A few men. All financially stable. All declining right when someone else needed control. We sat together during one hearing, lined up on a hard bench, like survivors of a storm no one wanted to admit was real. Some of them still had tremors from the meds. Some couldn't remember how long they'd been locked inside those places. One woman whispered to me, "I thought I was crazy. They told me I was." I squeezed her hand and said the only truth that mattered. You weren't. Caleb tried to flip the narrative. Of course he did. From jail, he claimed I manipulated him, said Spencer was the mastermind, said I staged everything to steal sympathy and money. Men like him don't take responsibility. They scatter blame like smoke. But here's the thing he didn't count on. Paper doesn't lie. Recordings don't flinch. And once a story breaks wide enough, it stops belonging to one man. It belongs to everyone. During sentencing, he finally looked at me. Not with anger, with confusion. Like he still didn't understand how the woman he underestimated had dismantled his entire future without screaming once. The judge read the charges slowly. Conspiracy, fraud, abuse of a vulnerable adult, attempted unlawful confinement. Each word landed heavier than the last. When the gavel came down, I exhaled a breath I'd been holding for years. I didn't smile. Justice isn't joy. It's closure. After that, life didn't magically turn peaceful. Healing isn't neat. Some nights, I still wake up panicked, convinced I've forgotten something important. Some mornings, I stare at my pill organizer too long before trusting it. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the threat is gone. But I learned how to live alongside it. My new routine grounded me. Coffee on the porch, Spencer trimming hedges, letters from the foundation stacked neatly on the table. I started speaking at small events, libraries, community centers, legal panels. I didn't dramatize anything. I just told the truth, and people listened. The scariest part wasn't realizing my husband planned to erase me. It was realizing how easy it would have been for him to succeed. That's what chilled the rooms when I spoke. Not fear, recognition. Because if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. One afternoon, months later, a reporter asked me if I hated him. I thought about it, really thought. Then I said, no. Hate would mean he still owns space in my head. He doesn't. What he left behind was something else. Awareness. Armor. A voice I didn't know I had. Spencer asked me once if I ever missed my old life. I told him the truth. I miss who I thought I was, not who I actually was. That woman believed safety came from marriage, from silence, from being agreeable. This woman knows better. The foundation grew, quietly but steadily. We didn't advertise, we responded. Every saved person felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But then, something happened. A letter arrived without a return address. Inside was a single sentence, typed, not handwritten. You ruined the wrong people's plans. No signature, no threat, just a promise disguised as a warning. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my evidence folder. Because when you've already survived someone trying to erase you, intimidation doesn't hit the same. It just tells you you're doing something right. That night, as I locked my door and turned off the lights, a thought settled in my chest, calm but heavy. Caleb wasn't the end of this story. He was just the beginning. And whatever came next, I wasn't hiding anymore. People think survival is about escaping danger. They're wrong. Survival is about what you build after the danger is gone. Once the trials ended and the noise died down, the world didn't clap for me. It didn't roll out a red carpet or hand me some shiny badge for woman who didn't get erased. Life just kept going. And for the first time in decades, it was going forward on my terms. I downsized, left the big house that had echoed with lies and expensive silence, moved into a small cottage with creaky floors, stubborn roses, and sunlight that hit the kitchen just right in the mornings. Every item I kept had history. My grandmother's china, my father's old books, my mother's jewelry. Not flashy, just meaningful. Things that belonged to me before I became somebody's wife. For years, I had been half of a couple that wasn't real. Now the mailbox out front carried just one name, mine. Not Mrs. Anything, just me. Letters started coming in. At first, I thought they were fan mail from people who'd seen the story on the news. They weren't. They were cries for help. Women, mostly older, some younger than me, all terrified. They wrote about sudden diagnoses, about family members insisting they needed care, about money being moved around for safety, about pills they didn't remember agreeing to take, about feeling like their own thoughts didn't belong to them anymore. Some of them hadn't been as lucky as I was. Some had lost years. Some had lost everything. I couldn't unread those letters. So I did the only thing that made sense. I started a small foundation. Nothing fancy. No big offices. Just legal help, documentation, and someone who actually listened when a woman said, "Something feels wrong." Spencer helped me run it. He never tried to lead, never spoke over me, never told me what I should do. He just stood beside me. That kind of partnership, respect without control, was something I'd never known before. One evening, sitting on the patio with a cheap bottle of wine and dirt still under our nails, he asked me something that caught me off guard. "Do you ever regret leaving your old life behind?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the woman I used to be. She lived in a bigger house, wore nicer clothes, attended polished dinners, smiled at people she didn't trust, married a man who was planning her disappearance. She thought stability meant safety. She was wrong. "No," I finally said. "I don't regret it. That life was built on lies. You can't regret losing something that was never real." He nodded like he already knew. At 64, I was learning freedom in small pieces. Eating dinner at noon if I felt like it. Reading all night. Planting vegetables instead of flowers. Making decisions without explaining them to anyone. Small freedoms, but together they felt enormous. A year after the case ended, a woman knocked on my door. Early 40s. Nervous, determined. She said, "My father is trying to have my grandmother committed so he can access her inheritance. I read about you. I don't know who else to ask." I invited her in, listened, and then I told her the same thing someone once told me, the words that saved my life. "You're not paranoid, and you're not alone." 6 months later, her father was in jail. Her grandmother was safe. Those moments became my new currency. Not money, not status, impact. Helping one person escape what almost destroyed me felt like reclaiming a piece of myself every single time. On the second anniversary of the day, the gardener grabbed my wrist and told me not to go to Paris. Spencer and I shared a quiet toast in the garden. "To second chances," he said. "To first chances," I corrected, because that's what it really was. The first time I lived honestly. The first time I trusted my instincts. The first time I chose myself without apology. I thought about the woman I'd been. Confused, trusting, easy to manipulate. She didn't die the way my husband planned. She transformed. And that made her far more dangerous to people like him. Now, before I go, I want to ask you something. What would you do if someone you trusted tried to erase you quietly? Would you doubt yourself? Or would you listen to that small voice telling you something isn't right? If this story hit you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or maybe even yourself, stay with this channel. Subscribe, because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings, and sometimes they're lifelines. Thank you for listening to mine.